I arrived early. The morning sun hadn't climbed high yet, but the heat in Atlanta was already sitting thick on my skin like unspoken words. My copper scarf, the one Mama left me in her will, was tied firm around my shoulders. That scarf wasn't just fabric, it was my anchor, my armor, and my reminder that I didn't come from nothing. The church sat proud and loud, dressed in white lilies and gold trim, gospel music curling through the air like sweet tea on a hot porch. Family gathered in loud bursts, laughing, snapping photos, complimenting outfits with that southern flair. "Ooh, girl, you did that!" And, "Baby, who did your edges?" I stood near the entrance, letting it all wash over me. I wanted to smile, truly. My baby girl was getting married, and I'd helped build this day from the ground up. Quietly. Bills paid, dress tailored, every detail handled without asking for thanks. But I could feel it, the distance in their eyes, like I was furniture. A fixture, not a person. Willard found me before I made it down the aisle. His voice carried more than it needed to. "Well, I'll be that old rag again?" His eyes landed square on my scarf. "You wearing that to our daughter's big day?" Some folks chuckled nearby. I didn't flinch. I smiled, slow, tight. "It's my mother's." He shook his head, already moving away. "Always gotta make it about you somehow." The sting was sharp, but not unfamiliar. I pulled the scarf tighter. Sometimes the loudest voice is silence. One of Mama's old sayings, still true, always true. Inside the sanctuary, they directed me to a folding chair near the back. "Restroom's right there if you need it," the usher whispered like she was doing me a favor. I blinked. My name wasn't in the program, not as mother of the bride, not anywhere. Strangers filled the front row, folks I'd never seen in my life. But there they were, prime seating. I looked down at my hands. These hands that wrote checks, scrubbed floors, held fevers, prayed through nights. These hands made this day possible. But I wasn't the one being seen. Flashback hit like lightning. The tuition I paid so she could go to Spelman. The time I pawned my wedding ring to cover her rent. Willard had always taken the credit, and she'd let him. "Still I rise," I murmured, barely audible. Maya's voice in my chest. The choir was warming up, people shuffling in. My daughter stood near the altar, fussing with her veil. She looked over once. Eyes met mine. Then she looked away. Didn't wave, didn't smile. She saw me, but didn't want to. I sat down, feet firm on the floor, hands folded. Behind me, someone whispered, "She's just the check writer." Tyreek, one of the groomsmen, stood tall across the aisle. Young man. Probably didn't know all the politics in this room, but he saw something. He looked straight at me and nodded once. Slow, respectful. I nodded back, just barely. Maybe I imagined it, but maybe, just maybe, somebody noticed. A hymn started. One I hadn't heard in decades, brought me straight back to New Hope Baptist on Campbellton Road. Mama in her white usher dress, passing out fans with the choir's faces on them. My throat tightened. I reached for the scarf again. Still here, still standing. I thought of all the nights I stayed up while Willard ran off with lies in his mouth and guilt in his shoes. All the birthdays I planned, the appointments I drove to, the quiet thank yous that never came. And I saw it now, clearer than ever. Every time I held my tongue, I trained them to ignore me. Every time I said, "It's fine," I told them it was okay to leave me out. I ain't no ghost. I am not a ghost. That became my mantra, whispering through the shame. The music swelled. People stood. Tyreek looked at me again, this time longer. His eyes met mine, and for the first time that day, I felt seen. I followed the crowd out of the sanctuary and into the reception hall, careful not to walk too fast or too slow, just enough to blend in. The room smelled of fried catfish, honey-glazed ham, and somebody's auntie's macaroni pie. Round tables were dressed in white with gold ribbons, candles flickering low in mason jars, giving everything that southern charm. But even with the warm lighting, I could feel the chill in the air. And it wasn't the air conditioning. People smiled without meaning it. They walked past me like I was holding a tray, not a last name. Conversations dipped when I got too close, picked back up once I passed. I didn't need to hear the words. Tone told me enough. I took a seat at the edge, where the light barely reached, pretending to adjust my scarf just to keep my hands busy. From across the room, Tyreek stood near the gift table. Young man, broad shoulders, polished shoes. Our eyes met again, only for a second. He didn't wave, didn't need to. The look said, "I saw what they did." I turned away before anyone noticed. My seat faced the dance floor. My daughter was hugging guests, smiling wide for pictures, her train fanned out like a magazine cover. Willard stayed close to her, one hand always on her shoulder or her waist, like he owned the moment. Then I heard him. "I told y'all," he said, chuckling, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "I had to dig deep to make this happen, but you do what you gotta do for your baby girl." Laughter followed, nods, compliments. My hands went still. Dig deep. Late nights flooded back. Me walking the hospital corridors on double shifts, counting out payments in silence, wiring deposits to caterers and dressmakers behind closed doors. I did that. Every dime. Every decision. And here he was, taking bows like he bled for it. I closed my eyes. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Doctor. King's voice rang in my head, not just as memory, as warning. I didn't say a word, but I heard myself breathing deeper, slower. On the next table, 3 women leaned close, talking low but sharp. She tried to upstage her own daughter. Imagine that. You know how she is. Always been a little difficult. She didn't even pay for the flowers, that's what I heard. That last one cut deep. I looked at the centerpiece on their table, roses and calla lilies in a crystal vase. I remembered writing the florist a check and hand-delivering it. But facts don't stand a chance against a good rumor. I didn't flinch. Not outwardly. But inside, something shifted. That wasn't gossip. That was a hit job. It was Willard. Laying groundwork. Rewriting history before anyone could notice. And it was working. Another woman, one I barely knew, leaned over and whispered, "I know today must be hard for you. But maybe don't make it about yourself." I smiled politely. "You're right," I said. "I wouldn't want to disturb the fantasy." I kept my voice soft, but she blinked like it stung. This wasn't new. This had been happening for years. Every family gathering, every holiday, every time I stayed quiet to keep the peace, I handed them permission to erase me. It was no accident. It was a pattern. And now it was loud. "I am not a ghost," I whispered, again, louder inside. "I am not a ghost." I reached for my phone, pulled it from my purse beneath the tablecloth. There it was, an email from the caterer, dated last week. "Thanks again for the early payment, Miss Claretta. Everything's confirmed." Proof, not a theory, not bitterness, truth. I didn't plan to show it, not yet, but I needed to remember that I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't petty. I was erased. Tyreek was closer now. He stood by the DJ booth, but he wasn't dancing. He looked my way again, and this time his nod was slower, deeper, like he knew, like he was waiting. I let go of the scarf just a little, loosened the knot at my throat. For the first time all day, I let my chest expand without it pressing back. I wasn't just sitting there anymore. I was watching, recording, remembering. Willard tapped his glass with a fork. "Everybody quiet down now," he called. "I got a toast." Laughter died down. The room fell into hush. "Let's raise our glasses," he said, lifting his champagne high. "To the woman who made this day possible, me." People laughed. Glasses clinked. Mine didn't move. My hand stayed on my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. In that moment, I knew my silence would soon end. Back home, the silence was almost aggressive. I slipped off my heels at the edge of the bed, each step barefoot across the wooden floor, tapping out memories I didn't ask to relive. The dim light from the hallway crept in, casting soft shadows on my dresser and the framed photo of my mother next to the jewelry box. My makeup held, barely, but I felt smudged all over. The buzz of the reception still rang in my ears, but the silence afterward, that's what echoed louder. I could still see Willard raising that glass, grinning like a boy who'd just pulled off a good trick, toasting himself while I sat there with proof of every check I'd written, Every appointment I'd made, hidden in my phone like secrets I wasn't supposed to have. Lying back, I stared at the ceiling fan as it turned slow and steady. That motion reminded me of a day I'd tucked away years ago. Willard had come home early one evening, face flushed with charm and cheap cologne, and handed me a single envelope. No explanation, no eye contact, just, "You'll want to see this." It was a statement from our joint investment account, or what was left of it. He'd drained it, quietly, behind my back, to fund a venture he said was for the future. But that future never included me. I never confronted him, told myself it wasn't worth the fight. Back then, our daughter was just starting high school, and I was working overtime every weekend. I buried the betrayal, telling myself it was a one-time thing. But tonight made it clear it wasn't. That moment planted the seed for everything I was living now. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I didn't. I made excuses. I preyed on it. And now here I was, laying in a house that held my name, but not my story. There was a soft knock at the bedroom door. I sat up, confused. It was late. I hadn't expected anyone to stop by, much less knock gently like they had a reason to. "Miss Claretta?" It was Denzel, my son-in-law. I opened the door halfway. He stood there, tie loosened, breath mint on his tongue. "I just wanted to check in," he said, giving that polite smile folks use when they're hiding something. "Big day. Lots of moving parts." I nodded. He lingered, then tilted his head like we were old friends. "You know, folks talk, and sometimes even good women. Well, their legacy can shift real quick if the wrong stories get out." I froze. He kept his voice light, but the air between us tightened. That wasn't concern. That was a warning dressed like a favor. I watched his eyes, calm, too calm. Either Willard sent him, or he was in it with him. "I appreciate your thoughts," I said flatly. "You rest well now." He nodded and left without pushing. I locked the door behind him, hand trembling just a bit. I walked over to the bookshelf, pulled down an old leather photo album, the one with our wedding pictures. My gown was simpler than my daughter's, but my eyes back then, they held something hers didn't tonight. Certainty. Back then, I still believed I mattered in this house. I flipped to the last page, an image of me holding our daughter as a baby. No one else in the frame. Back then, I was enough. Now, I'd traded so much of myself, trying to keep the family whole, that there wasn't much left untouched. I put the album down and pulled out my journal. The old leather still felt warm in my hands, like it remembered me even when people didn't. Page 1. Tonight, I buried the silence that's been killing me softly. I kept writing. Names, details, conversations, facts no one would spin. My phone buzzed beside me. It was a text from Tyreek. "If you need someone who sees you, I do." That message, it didn't fix anything, but it felt like a hand reaching through the dark. I set the phone down gently, then closed my journal. "They think I'm still quiet," I whispered to the walls, but the silence they expect is about to betray them. The Sunday sun poured into my kitchen window, soft and golden, but it didn't warm a thing. I laid out 2 plates, not 3, for the first time in years. I'd made fried catfish, collard greens, and cornbread. I even lit the good candle. Not for peace, but for clarity. Zula wasn't invited today. That was my doing. She'd made her choice yesterday. Standing quiet while I was pushed to the back row of my own daughter's wedding. Today, I needed space, not from her body, from her silence. As I set the silverware, I replayed Willard's toast again and again in my mind. The way he smirked like he'd won something, as if the applause had anything to do with him, and how the room followed his lead like he was the sun we all circled. The front door creaked. I didn't look up. Willard stepped in, humming some old Sam Cooke tune like it was any other Sunday. I waited until he sat, reached for his glass of sweet tea, before I spoke. "I'm not doing this anymore," I said. He blinked, still mid-sip. Doing what? Playing dumb, pretending I'm blind, letting you humiliate me like it's some harmless joke. Publicly, privately, that ends now. He laughed, that same lazy, dismissive chuckle he used when he thought I was being extra. You had your little moment last night, he said, waving his hand. Ain't no need to drag it out. I'm documenting everything from this day forward, I told him, slow and clear. Every lie, every time you twist my words, every dollar you take credit for that wasn't yours. I've been silent, yes, but don't mistake my silence for permission. He sat back, lips parting like he was ready to say something clever. Then nothing came, just his eyes narrowing. That's supposed to scare me? No, I said. It's supposed to inform you. He didn't eat, just pushed his plate forward. You always did like drama. An hour later, the phone rang. I saw her name, Zula, and let it go to voicemail the first time. Then it rang again. I picked up. Ma, she said. Why are you doing this? My voice was steady. Doing what? Stirring things up. People are talking. Daddy said you're threatening him. You're ruining the tone of everything. My chest got tight, but my hands stayed still. You think I'm the one ruining the tone? I asked. She hesitated. Look, I know things got weird, but can't we just move on? You're making this bigger than it needs to be. That's when I heard it. Willard. In her. His words. His tactics. And I realized they weren't just ignoring me. They were already rewriting the story, framing me as the unstable one. It's funny, I said quietly, how folks will drown you, then act offended when you stop swimming. She didn't respond. Just silence, then a clipped, I'll call you later, before the line went dead. I walked outside, barefoot. The backyard swing creaked under me like it used to when I rocked her to sleep decades ago. The trees looked the same, but nothing else did. I sat still, trying to decide which part of me was worth saving. The mother, the wife, the woman who gave up dreams to make others comfortable. I stared out at the fence line, and I let go of one question. Would they ever believe me? Because that didn't matter anymore. I wasn't here to convince them. I was here to see clearly. That night, after the dishes were done and the house settled, I sat in the den with my phone in one hand and my journal in the other. I pressed record. Sunday, 6:42 p.m. Willard attempted to dismiss a direct conversation about emotional abuse. He smirked, called me dramatic. I warned him, this is day one. Click. I opened my laptop and started searching. Legal forums, women's support groups, posts from women like me, over 60, overlooked, underestimated, but not done. I titled the first page in my new journal, Day 1, From Silence to Strategy. Then I walked into my bedroom. On the nightstand sat our wedding photo, the one with the fake smiles and the cake I paid for. I picked it up, stared long and hard at the young woman in that picture. Then I placed it face down. The afternoon sunlight lay heavy across the yard as I stepped through the back gate. Plates and bowls and chatter filled the air. Mouth-watering smells mingled with strained greetings. Zula had done her best to give this one the face of a reunion. I carried my peach cobbler in a dish, tried to steady my hands. I came to observe, not to swallow more pain. I chose a seat near the fence, away from the noise. I watched Willard laugh with his old friends, the way his arm draped over Zula's shoulder like he owned her. I remembered easier days, picnics we had years ago, me handing out sweet tea in garden chairs, him calling me my rock. That was before profits, before power, before the erasing. Then it came, right in front of the circle of folding chairs. Willard stood, loud enough to catch every eye. Y'all see Mom over there? Bless her heart, she still wears that old-school dignity like she thinks she's something special. He grinned wide. She ought to know her place. They laughed. Some clapped. Zula even joined. Faces turned toward me, smiles perched like knives. My cheeks warmed, my breath slowed. I felt cornered, but I didn't shrink. He picked up a plate and handed it to me. Not a shared offering. The way he passed it told me he thought I'd reach down to take it, like I was less than human. I rose. I walked toward him. My voice didn't shake. "You speak like this in front of your own family and expect nobody to hear you?" I said. Cold, firm. He blinked. People turned. The laughter stuttered. "You know what they don't see," I said, "is the nights I held your dreams when yours weren't enough. The money I put down without claim. The prayers I whispered when doors didn't open. You mocking me now tells more about you than it ever could about me." I didn't take the plate. I left it on the lawn. Spiced peach cobbler untouched. The hush went deep. Women in hats gasped. Children paused mid-play. Neighbors peered over fences. Whispers passed like wind. Zula's face drained. Willard's mouth opened and closed without sound. I stood still, scanned the crowd, let the heat of their scrutiny push me into clarity. That night, Zula texted, "Why would you make it about you?" I didn't answer. I walked into the hallway and changed the family photos. The ones with me smiling at milestones went into storage. In their place, landscapes, sunsets, storms, symbols of a world beyond this suffocating house. In my journal, I wrote, "I wasn't loud, but I was clear. If they don't hear me now, they never will." Later, I reached out to a local group for older women who face silent abuse. I drafted an outline for a speech, not for pity, but for warning others not to let shadows steal their worth. My phone buzzed. A niece I adore had texted, "I saw it all. Thank you for showing me how to speak up." It was small, but holy. In my bedroom, I locked a small drawer. Inside, a flash drive, my new will, and a folded letter addressed simply to the ones who laughed. I stood there a minute, breathing slow. Then I closed it tight. Late afternoon light spilled over the garden as I stepped through the wrought iron gate. The venue was dressed up with white tents, paper lanterns swaying gently, and flower arrangements in tall glass vases. Guests milled about, greeting each other with smiles that tightened when they saw me. I'd chosen a simple navy dress, clean lines, no frills, my copper scarf draped lightly over one shoulder. My steps were measured. My eyes took in everything. A long table lined the walkway, framed family portraits propped up like trophies of belonging. I slowed. Some of the faces were familiar, but others, mine, were gone. In the big reunion shot from last summer, I was simply absent, cropped out so cleanly it looked like I'd never been there. My stomach turned. I watched Zula whisper to an aunt, both glancing in my direction. A small boy ran past with a phone in his hand, giggling. Something inside me felt the sting, but it no longer made me small. The host, Del Rico, stood on a small riser, calling everyone over. "Let's honor our roots with this new portrait." He unveiled a large canvas. My eyes locked on the center. Willard grinning, Zula radiant, cousins in bright colors, but no me. My space filled with a stranger's face. It wasn't an oversight. It was erasure, deliberate and public. My mind flickered back to my childhood home in Birmingham, the old family portrait above the fireplace. Everyone present, even those who'd passed on, had a place in that frame. Now here I stood, breathing, and somehow missing. The chatter swelled. My hand tightened around my scarf. As they gathered for a new group photo, I was pulled into the edge. A hand at my elbow, a subtle push, not enough to call out, but enough to shift me off the mark. The photographer, distracted, clicked. In a blink, I was out of the frame. I heard a few murmurs. Someone muttered, "Guess she's just an extra now." Another chuckled. Phones rose, capturing the moment. I inhaled slowly. I will not be invisible, I told myself. I walked to the photographer, voice steady. I deserve to be in that picture. I earned a place in this family. He blinked. Willard stepped up with that soft, dangerous smile. "Honey, it was just a mistake." Zula's voice cut through. "Mom, don't embarrass us again." I didn't answer. The words weren't for them anymore. They were bricks I'd stopped carrying. Inside, my resolve settled like stone. Later, while guests sipped lemonade and pretended nothing had happened, my phone buzzed. A notification. a photo posted online with a caption. Who is this extra in our family? My image barely in the corner, laughter emojis beneath. I opened my own album, found a vintage shot, me at the center of a family picnic, arms around Willard and Zula. I posted it to my own page. I have always been here. Within minutes, comments poured in. Some relatives were shocked. A few guests defended me. Tyreek messaged, "You don't have to fight this alone." I allowed myself a small smile, not of victory, but of recognition. This was no longer a private wound. It was a record. I locked my phone. A voice behind me, low and firm, whispered, "They tried to erase you, but they forgot. Archives always exist." The knock at the door came just after 9. I was still in my slippers, the TV playing low in the background. I figured it was a neighbor, maybe someone dropping off leftover pie from Sunday dinner. But when I opened it, there was Tyreek, standing on my porch, eyes red like he'd been fighting himself before even getting in the car. He didn't wait to be invited in. "Can we talk?" he asked, already stepping through. He sat on the couch like it wasn't his first time in years. No greeting, no small talk. He just pulled out his phone and scrolled. "I saw this," he said. His thumb hovered, then tapped open a thread of messages. A screenshot from the family group chat. My name, twisted. My mind, questioned. Jokes, mockery. Comments like, "She's finally fading out." It stung deeper than anything I'd felt in a long while. He showed me one from Aunt Dolores, my cousin's mother. A woman who once held my hand at my husband's funeral and told me I was the backbone. She'd written, "Let her go quietly. She won't notice anyway." I didn't say a word. I just nodded, lips pressed together so hard they might have cracked. Tyreek looked at me, expecting something. Tears, anger, denial. But I stayed still. "Thank you," I said, "for showing me." He looked ashamed for being the one to bring it, but I didn't let him carry it. "I'm glad you did." When he left, the house fell silent again. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that hums loud, like a power line you didn't know was buzzing until it broke. I sat at my desk, pulled out my old tablet. It was slow booting up, but it still had life. I searched the group messages, not just recent ones. I scrolled back months. Buried in emojis and birthday wishes were knives dressed like prayers. There it was, a message from Zula. "We gotta make sure Mom doesn't speak at the wedding. She'll ruin the vibe." I sat back in my chair, let the air settle. I started printing every one, page after page, not because I needed proof anymore, but because I wanted to see it laid out, tangible, real. I held each sheet like a scar someone tried to pretend wasn't there. As I slid them into a folder, I knocked something from the back of the drawer, a leather-bound book, worn and brittle. My mother's journal. I hadn't touched it in years. I flipped it open. Her handwriting, sharp and elegant, filled the pages. I found an entry dated June 1968. She wrote about her sister. How a rumor she'd started cost Mama her leadership at church. "The devil never comes with horns," she wrote. "Sometimes she comes wearing your bloodline." I shut the book and held it to my chest. This wasn't new. The silence. The betrayal. It had roots. Roots that ran deeper than I knew. Maybe that's why I stayed quiet so long. Thought it was noble. Thought it was tradition. But tradition shouldn't taste like poison. "Silence ain't peace," I whispered to myself. "It's prison, if you didn't choose it." I stood, walked to the kitchen, put the kettle on. While it heated, I opened a new notebook, wrote every name, every lie, every slight. I wasn't writing for them. I was writing for me, not to fight, to remember. Then the kettle screamed. I didn't rush to silence it. I let it cry out. When I finally turned it off, I poured myself a cup, set it next to the journal, exhaled. Later that night, I drafted a letter. No emotions, no accusations, just facts. Who I was stepping away from, which events I'd never attend again, who I trusted to carry what's left of this family's honor. Tyreek's name was underlined. I opened the voice recorder on my phone, started re-recording the opening of my will. "This is not revenge," I said slowly. "This is clarity." I scheduled a meeting with Pastor Alden for Sunday morning. By now, the clock showed nearly midnight. I sealed the letter in an envelope. Just as I did, my phone buzzed on the table. A voicemail from Zula. "Mama, call me. Something's happened." I sat still, let the silence return, but this time, it didn't scream. It waited. Sunday morning came quiet. I rose before the sun. Didn't need an alarm. Some things in life ring louder than clocks. Got dressed in a soft gray skirt suit. Nothing fancy, just steady. The kind of thing you wear when you want to be seen but not stared at. I drove myself. Parked on the far side of the lot, near the oak tree where I used to walk laps when Willard would sit inside, half listening to sermons he didn't live by. When I stepped into the church, the air shifted. Some heads turned. Some eyes dropped. The elders nodded gently, the way folks do when they've seen a storm walk into a sanctuary and still take a seat in the front row. That's where I went. Not for pride, for position. I wasn't hiding today. The sermon was about survival. You are not who they say you are. You are what you survive. That line sat heavy on me. I didn't cry, didn't shout amen. I just listened. Let it sink. Let it burn through. After the service, Pastor Alden motioned me toward his office. He closed the door soft, like he was afraid to wake something. "I've heard some things, Claretta," he started. "From Zula, from Dolores. I'm not here to ask for sides, but I do want to know. Do you want to speak to the congregation? Clear the air?" I shook my head. "No, sir, let it be. The truth don't need a microphone. It just needs time." We sat in quiet for a while. Then we prayed. Not for healing, but for peace. That's all I needed now. Not to fix them, just to let them stay broken without breaking me too. By the time I got home, the leaves had started to fall. The porch creaked under Zula's weight as she stood waiting. No makeup, eyes swollen. That alone said more than any apology could. "I was wrong," she whispered. "But I was also scared. Of turning into you." I looked her square. "I hope you mean that with love, not shame." She broke, right there on the steps. "You were always too strong, Mama. It scared folks." I sighed, deep and slow. "That ain't my fault. That's their smallness." We hugged, but not the kind that resets the clock. It was the kind that says, "I love you, but I ain't forgetting." That evening, I called the family over for dinner. Word spread fast, like it always does when people expect drama. They came dressed for closure. Probably thought I'd make a speech, ask forgiveness, pass around sweet tea and hugs. I stood at the head of the table, calm. "I'm not here to revisit wounds," I said. "I'm here to clarify the will." I pulled out the folder and read, "The house goes to Tyreek." Heads turned. "My jewelry, journals, and letters go to the women's shelter down off Peachtree." Eyes darted. "To Zula." I paused. "You already carry my blood. That's enough of a gift. Do better with it." The room froze. No one moved. No one clapped. But no one spoke back either. And that silence, it told me they knew. They felt it. Later that night, after they left, I walked out to the backyard. The garden looked tired, but it was still growing, just like me. I passed the swing Tyreek fixed last spring. I touched the rose bush Zula helped me plant before she had a child of her own and forgot how to nurture me. I whispered, "I'm more than what they made me feel." And I meant it. I sat on the porch, wrapped myself in an old quilt, and looked up at the sky. Just breathed. Not because all was perfect, but because I no longer needed it to be. Later, I closed my journal for the last time, laid it beside my chair. And in that hush, I heard my own voice, like I was talking straight to whoever might be listening. "Ain't about how loud you fight. Sometimes it's how silently you walk away, and still win." Morning came softly, sunlight filtering through the curtains like a quiet promise. I stood at the kitchen counter, hearing birds call outside, something I hadn't noticed in nights filled with tension. The air in the house felt peaceful, unfamiliar, but welcome. I poured coffee slowly, hands steady, not shaking. I didn't feel grief this time. I felt clarity. I opened a letter left on the table, in Javante's handwriting. Inside, words of respect, acknowledgement of what he saw. what he regretted staying silent about. His voice across these pages held weight. I folded it gently, placed it beside my mug. Maybe the ones we pour into aren't always our own, but they carry our fire anyway. I draped the shawl over my shoulders and stepped outside, letting the sun warm my face, letting the quiet house behind me remind me I still had roots here. My phone rang mid-morning. It was my daughter. Her voice came soft. "Mom, I didn't know half the truths. Javante filled me in." I listened. She didn't say she was sorry yet. She asked, "Can I visit?" My chest pounded. The distance between us felt both wide and fragile. I swallowed. "Yes," I said, though my voice trembled a little. It wasn't reconciliation, but a thread, a promise. I walked into the small cafe we always used to frequent, an old friend there waiting for me. She greeted me with a warm hug, no words needed at first. We sat with steaming cups between us. She asked how I'd slept. I told her, better than I have in years. We talked about survival, betrayal, dignity. She leaned in and said softly, "A woman who walks through fire ain't meant to stay burnt." I cracked a smile. We laughed, remembering days when life felt lighter, before secrets layered over everything. The past didn't feel heavy right then, just part of what built me. Back home, I walked quietly into the garden I'd been tending in secret. The soil smelled of earth and possibility. I pushed open the gate wide to let sunlight flood the flower beds. A neighbor passed by and nodded, a look of respect on her face. I didn't shrink. I accepted it. I sat at a small table with my journal, not to rewrite pain, but to plan. A mentorship group for women who felt silenced, displaced. My scars became stepping stones, not shackles. Later, I checked the mailbox. Inside was a letter with no return address. I opened it. A photo slipped out. My younger self, full of hope, strong eyes. On the back, someone had written, "You always were the storm, not the shelter." I stared at it, confusion at first. A chill ran through me, but it wasn't fear. It felt like recognition. I slid the photo into my journal, folded it gently. Maybe someone else remembers. I rose and walked inside toward the light in my home.